What makes a city a home? Is it family and friends? Or perhaps it's your house, your job, or a place to unwind? How about the natural environment? Tallahassee works to preserve trees through effective planning. Trees add beauty, give us shade, and connect us to our past as a link to the generations that came before us. The city's growth management department works to balance and protect the many things that make a city a home. We all need a place to live, a place to work, and a place to play. We also need trees to keep nature close to our busy lives. Sometimes the various needs of a city compete with each other. We take notice when a tree is removed because of a new development project, but the jobs created by a new project are also helping to make Tallahassee a home for someone else. If specific criteria are met, the city code may allow the removal of a tree. In many other cases, however, it requires the preservation of trees. Our goal with this series of videos is to explain the city's tree preservation requirements from beginning to end. This video series has 5 parts. Part 1 outlines the city's tree preservation standards. Part 2 details the city's minimum planting requirements for both on-site landscaping and the urban forest. Part 3 focuses on what residential homeowners need to know about tree preservation. Part 4 explains how these requirements are enforced. Part 5 concentrates on tree protection activities spearheaded by other city departments. This video is part 1 of the series. It will focus on the tree preservation standards that are implemented by the city's growth management department. Let's start by mentioning where the city's tree preservation standards are located. The Tallahassee Land Development Code contains the standards that city staff follow when reviewing a proposed new project. There are 10 chapters of the Tallahassee Land Development Code. The section that addresses trees is Chapter 5. For the rest of this video series, when you hear Chapter 5, that's referring to Chapter 5 of the Land Development Code. Most cities make their codes available online through a company called municode. You can read all of the city's environmental regulations if you're interested. Search for municode library, click on the top result, and click on the state of Florida, then click on the T at the top of the screen, then click Tallahassee, and then click on Land Development Code. Finally, on the left-hand side of the screen, click on Chapter 5 Environmental Management. You now have access to the Land Development Code for environmental management. You will see this graphic each time we switch to a new topic. It will also provide the corresponding citation to Chapter 5. So, let's get started. Chapter 5 identifies an array of benefits that trees provide for the city. For example, trees help to recharge groundwater, purify the air, generate oxygen, control stormwater runoff, replenish native species, protect endangered or threatened species, enhance scenic areas, limit erosion and sedimentation, reduce noise, reduce glare, conserve energy, provide shade, provide wildlife habitat, and buffer between incompatible land uses. Because of the clear benefit provided by trees, Chapter 5 sets standards for their preservation. For the tree preservation standards to make sense, there are a few important terms that need to be defined. Let's start with the most basic question. How does Chapter 5 define a tree? Tree means any self-supporting woody plant having at least one well-defined stem a minimum of 2 inches at diameter breast height and which normally grows to a minimum height of 25 feet. Diameter at breast height, or DBH, means the diameter of a tree measured at a height of 54 inches above the naturally occurring ground level. This video series will repeatedly refer to a tree's measurement using this DBH standard. Whenever you hear DBH, think diameter at breast height. Critical Protection Zone, or CPZ, describes the area surrounding a tree within a circle defined by a radius of 1 foot for each inch of the tree's DBH. It's the area around a tree where the roots considered critical to the structural stability or health of the tree are located. You'll also hear references to a tree's CPZ throughout these videos. It's the area that Chapter 5 focuses on. Tree removal means the actual removal of a tree. However, it also includes any unmitigated impact to the critical protection zone of a protected tree. Any damage to 30% or more of the crown of a protected tree, or any other activity likely to damage a protected tree. The key takeaway from the definition of tree removal is that it means much more than the complete removal of a tree. Please note that the definition uses the phrase unmitigated impact. As will be discussed later in this video, a removed tree must be mitigated by either replanting new trees elsewhere or by preserving existing trees. Tree protection means protection of the critical protection zone of a tree. Caliper means the diameter of a tree. It is measured 12 inches above the soil line for trees required to have a 4-inch or greater caliper. It is measured 6 inches above the soil line for trees required to have less than 4-inch caliper. Crown is the upper part of a tree, measured from the lowest branch, including all the branches and foliage. It also refers to the canopy of a tree. Crown spread means the distance measured across the greatest diameter of the crown of a plant or a tree. Tree credits are approved for trees that are preserved or planted. The number of allowable credits varies based on both the size and species of tree. Tree debits are assessed to a project for trees that are removed. The number of debits varies according to the tree's size and species. A shade tree is any self-supporting woody plant of a species that is generally well-shaped, well-branched, and well-foliated that normally grows to an overall minimum height of 35 feet with a minimum average mature crown spread of 30 feet. Shade trees are commonly accepted by tree professionals as a species that can be expected to survive for at least 15 years in a healthy and vigorous growing condition over a wide range of environmental conditions. Patriarch tree is a tree designated as a patriarch or state champion tree by the State Division of Forestry. Exceptional specimen means an individual tree which is in very good to good condition as evidenced by the following: less than 10% upper crown dieback, few epicormic branches, which typically grow when a tree is damaged, stressed, or in poor health, the absence of signs or symptoms of severe disease or other characteristics commonly employed to measure tree health, and other qualities like size, species, age, form, or historical significance which make the tree unique. An exceptional specimen is a tree deserving special consideration as a biological and social resource to be preserved for the benefit of the general public. Urban forest means a generally continuous area of existing or new trees which are at least 6 inches dBH. An urban forest must meet specific planting density requirements and cannot be otherwise needed to meet the other landscaping requirements. A high-quality successional forest is a native forest that has been adversely impacted by man or nature, but has the potential to return to a healthy native forest, with the final determination by the city's biologist. Native forest means a high-quality natural community that is dominated by native species and is recognized as a forest type per the criteria noted in the Environmental Management Ordinance. Preservation areas include unaltered wetlands, water bodies, water courses, unaltered floodplains and floodways, native forests, habitats of endangered species, threatened species, and species of special concern, and archaeological or historical sites. Development activity is prohibited in preservation areas and conservation easements are required. Conservation areas include altered wetlands, altered floodplains, closed basins, high-quality successional forest, active karst features, canopy roads, and special development zones. Within limits, development activity may be permitted in conservation areas. The cornerstone of the city's tree preservation program is the concept of tree credits and tree debits. Let's start with tree credits. That's our next topic. While it's possible to obtain a permit to remove a protected tree under specific conditions, which will be described later in this video, that's not the end of the story. Chapter 5 manages tree removal through a system of credits and debits. Credits are allowed for trees that are preserved or planted, while debits are assessed for trees that are removed. Tree credits and tree debits represent the planting or preservation versus the taking of a tree. As shown by the table, credits vary based on both the species and size of the tree that is proposed to be preserved. Tree species are grouped into categories A, B, C, and D. Broadly speaking, the trees represented by categories A, B, C, and D transition from species that are most common in category A to those that are least common and more environmentally beneficial in category D. The category D trees are considered to be of greater environmental value, so their preservation is more encouraged. The number of credits and debits at a site determine how many trees must be replanted. Credit may be given for the planting of a new tree or the preservation of an existing tree provided the following criteria are met. The critical protection zone of each preserved tree must be protected during development activities and maintained during and after development in a natural state. There can be no impervious area or grade change within the critical protection zone of the tree. The tree may not be damaged from skinning, barking, or bumping. There may be no evidence of active disease or insect infestation potentially lethal to the tree. Trees within urban forest areas are preserved consistent with Chapter 5. Hand clearing is required when necessary to remove debris or invasive vegetation. And tree protection requirements of Chapter 5 must be met. Debits, on the other hand, represent the trees that must be replaced due to removal. Removal of the protected trees requires compensation. Tree compensation is determined using tree debits and tree credits. Debits also vary based on both the species and size of the tree that is proposed to be removed. Debits group trees into categories A, B, C, and D. Debits must meet the following criteria. First, if the development site is not large enough for all required tree replantings, the applicant may enter into an agreement with the city to either plant the extra trees on an approved public site or to pay the city for public landscaping projects. Second, if any tree for which credit was given is not alive and growing when the project is completed, it must be removed and replaced. Third, if protected trees are removed without a permit, the number of replacement trees must be up to 3 times the required number for the first offense and 5 times for each subsequent offense. Fourth, a plan must be prepared by the applicant that documents how the site will be reforested. So, tree credits and debits are the building blocks of the city's tree preservation standards. But what's the standard for the required tree planting and landscaping at a site? The focus of this video is on preservation standards. The second video will go into detail concerning tree planting standards. However, I'll mention it briefly now to introduce the idea. There are 3 things to keep in mind. First, debits cannot be greater than credits. Second, all sites must provide a minimum number of trees equal to a ratio of 40 tree credits for each acre proposed for development. The only exception to this rule is for individual lots developed with a single-family residence, a duplex, or a triplex, or for a subdivision with 4 or fewer lots. Third, the urban forest and landscaping combined must be at least 40% of the total site area. If enhanced front perimeter buffers are provided, that standard can be changed to as low as 30%. Also, the urban forest must be at least 10% of the site, and the landscaping must be at least 5% of the site. There's one more point to highlight. Please keep in mind that the minimum green space requirement is less in certain downtown areas to promote urban infill development. The planting standards for the urban forest and landscaping will be discussed in even more detail in Part 2 of this video series. It's important to note that Chapter 5 does not take a one-size-fits-all approach. There are some limited, very well-defined circumstances where it simply makes common sense to allow the removal of a tree. Tree removal under the following circumstances is exempt from Chapter 5 and does not require a permit. Exemptions include a tree planted and grown by a lawful nursery, a tree removed due to an emergency when the city determines that the permitting requirements will hamper work to restore order, a non-patriarch tree up to 36 inches dBH on lots with single-family detached residential units, a tree which the city determines to be dangerous or an imminent hazard, a diseased or pest-infested tree, a tree at a site approved for silvicultural activities, a noxious invasive tree, and a tree that is the result of voluntary growth in any utility easement or utility right-of-way. So far, we've defined key terms, identified the preservation standard, and noted what is exempt. All of that happens in a 3-step process, which will be discussed next. The city's tree standards are applied through a 3-step process, including the natural features inventory, the environmental impact analysis, and the environmental management permit. That process assesses a wide range of natural features on a site. I'll focus specifically on trees. First, the Natural Features Inventory, or NFI, identifies and locates trees in the project boundary or within 150 feet of the project boundary. Trees that are identified in an NFI include native forests, high-quality successional forests, trees in a canopy road zone, exceptional specimen trees, patriarch trees, or trees that provide habitat for endangered species, threatened species, or species of special concern. Second, the Environmental Impact Analysis, or EIA, assesses the proposed project's overall impact on the forest type and other natural features identified in the NFI. Third, the Environmental Management Permit, or EMP, must include a tree removal plan for the removal of any protected tree. If trees are located in a Canopy Road Protection Zone, their removal must be reviewed by the Canopy Road Citizens Committee at a public meeting and mitigated through additional plantings or donation to a replanting fund. A tree removal permit is also required for trees outside of a Canopy Road Protection Zone through the Growth Management Department. That permit documents the size and species of the removed tree. It also identifies the number of replantings on site based on a system of credits for trees protected and debits for trees removed. To summarize, tree removal is either assessed to the Environmental Management Permit if required or by a standalone tree removal permit. Chapter 5 identifies specific sizes, species, and locations of trees which cause them to be protected. That's our next topic. At an existing detached single-family residence, any tree greater than or equal to 36 inches DBH is protected. Keep in mind that trees at detached single-family residences are also protected, regardless of size, if they are in the conservation or preservation zones specified in Chapter 5. At all other sites, which trees are protected varies based on whether they are proposed to be removed prior to development, as part of a development, or after development has been completed. Prior to development or permitting, any tree of 2 inches DBH or greater is protected. During and after development, there are a wide variety of trees that are protected and can't be removed, impacted, or damaged unless an environmental management permit is approved. That list of protected species includes any dogwood tree of 4 inches DBH or greater, any hardwood or longleaf pine trees of 12 inches DBH or greater, any other tree of 18 inches DBH or greater, any patriarch tree, any tree within a Canopy Road Protection Zone, any tree in a wetland, any tree planted to meet replanting, reforestation, or landscaping requirements of Chapter 5, any exceptional specimen trees that are identified by the city, and one more category of protected tree. This final category applies to trees at all sites except detached single-family dwellings. This standard applies to a lot perimeter zone, which is the area defined by the building setback or 20 feet, whichever is less. Within that lot perimeter zone, any tree that is 4 inches DBH or greater is protected. In addition to protecting specific tree species and tree sizes, Chapter 5 also preserves trees in the Canopy Road Protection Zones, which are located on portions of Meridian Road, Magnolia Drive, Miccosukee Road, Old St. Augustine Road, and Old Bainbridge Road. The Canopy Road Protection Zones are a type of conservation area. Limited development in the Canopy Road Protection Zone can only be considered subject to the following. No clearing may occur unless approved for legal access, unless no other alternatives exist, or unless needed for the health, safety, or welfare of the public. Any part of the Canopy Road Zone that is cleared or has trees removed from it must be widened by the same amount that was removed and must be replanted with native, non-invasive canopy trees, understory trees, and shrubs. A full analysis of the impact of a development on the affected canopy road must be submitted at the time of the development review. Joint access to canopy roads will be utilized unless there is no alternative. New cuts into canopy roads must be designed to serve more than one property development. No removal of understory vegetation is allowed within the Canopy Road tree protection zones, except as specified in a vegetation management plan. Canopy Road tree protection zones must be placed in a conservation easement. It's important to know which trees are protected, but you also need to know how you're going to protect them. Chapter 5 identifies specific actions that must be met to ensure tree protection. If a tree is going to be preserved, the root system in the critical protection zone must be protected from impacts associated with development. As a reminder, The critical protection zone is a circle surrounding a tree with a radius of 1 foot for each inch of the tree's DBH. Here's an example. To keep it simple, let's say you have one tree in your front yard. Remember that the DBH, or diameter at breast height, is measured 54 inches above the naturally occurring ground level. The diameter at breast height happens to be 25 inches in your example tree. So, that means the critical protection zone for that tree would be a circle with a radius of 25 feet, with the tree located at the middle of the circle. Protection of that critical protection zone is achieved by the following. Activities that may injure the tree are not allowed in the critical protection zone. That includes digging, filling, building, storing, and parking. All protected trees must be shown on the site plan submitted as part of the Environmental Management Permit application. The center line of proposed roadways and other improvements must be flagged and also noted on a site plan. Barriers must be installed at the critical protection zone perimeter of each protected tree prior to development to prevent root and soil compaction. All tree protection activities must be monitored and approved by a registered landscape architect or an ISA certified arborist. All protected trees must be watered by mechanical irrigation at a minimum rate of 1 inch of rainfall per week. Mulching must be used in the critical protection zone of protected trees and meet additional standards if vehicles must pass within it. Root pruning must occur as early as possible prior to any activity which may cause damage. If fertilization is needed, it must occur as far in advance of root pruning as possible. If soil has been compacted in the critical protection zone, it must be aerated by an ISA certified arborist to a depth of no less than 8 to 10 inches. Pruning and crown clearing must be performed by an ISA certified arborist following the standards listed in Chapter 5. Limited impacts to a tree's critical protection zone may be allowed with zero debits based on an approved tree mitigation plan and at the on-site direction of an arborist. However, any impact may not result in unsafe or unhealthy conditions for the tree. You might be wondering how the city ensures that all of these requirements are met on a busy development site. We do 3 things. First, a registered landscape architect or an ISA certified arborist must approve and monitor all of the tree protection activities that I just mentioned. Second, the city must also review and approve the tree protection plan prepared by the landscape architect or ISA certified arborist as part of the environmental management permit. Third, city inspectors regularly visit the project site throughout the construction process to ensure that the tree protection plan is being implemented. Finally, there are occasions when a protected tree may be approved for removal as part of a proposal for a new development. A permit for removal of a protected tree may be approved for 4 reasons. The first cause for removal of a protected tree is if it poses a safety hazard or threatens to cause disruption of public services. Second, if removal would prevent the spread of disease or pests. Third, if removal would be consistent with good forestry practices to reduce the competition between trees or to remove exotic species and replace them with native species. Fourth, if removal would assure a reasonable and permissible use of the property or is needed for the construction of essential improvements. However, while some trees might be approved for removal, all projects must meet the tree planting and preservation standards summarized by this video. We'll wrap up this video by using an actual project to illustrate the tree preservation standards. This 1.66 acre site was developed as a bank in 2009. This 2001 aerial shows the project site prior to development, and this 2018 aerial shows the parcel after development. As you can see by the aerials, trees were removed from the site, but a significant number of trees were either planted or preserved. A few minutes ago, we talked about the standards for required tree planting and landscaping. Let's talk about how those standards apply to the bank project. First, debits cannot be greater than credits. The trees removed at this project totaled 972 debits. However, there were 104 credits for preserved trees, leaving a balance of 868 debits. The project then planted 651 credits worth of trees from the category C and D lists, leaving a total of 217 remaining debits. This site did not have adequate space to plant the remaining trees, so the owner opted to mitigate the remaining trees by making a cash payment. The fee in lieu for trees when this project was permitted was $276 per debit. So, the total fee in lieu paid was $59,892. The city then uses those funds to plant trees elsewhere in the city on public lands. Second, all sites must provide a minimum number of trees equal to a ratio of 40 tree credits for each acre proposed for development. The bank in our example totaled 1.66 acres, so 40 tree credits times 1.66 results in a requirement of 66 credits worth of trees. Given that the bank earned 104 credits through tree preservation, this standard is also met. Third, the urban forest and landscaping combined must be at least 35% of the total site area. The bank qualified for the 35% standard because it provided a 20-foot wide landscape area along the front of the site. Individually, the urban forest must be at least 10% of the site, and landscaping must be at least 5% of the site. At the bank site, the total green space is 38.9% of the property, the urban forest is 10%, and the landscaping is 28.9%. All of the percentage standards were met. We hope you've enjoyed this video regarding the city's tree preservation standards. Don't forget that it's the first installment of a series of 5 videos. The remaining videos explore important tree topics, including the city's minimum planting requirements for both on-site landscaping and the urban forest in Part 2, what residential homeowners need to know about tree preservation in Part 3, how these requirements are enforced in Part 4, and tree protection activities spearheaded by other city departments in Part 5. If we can be of further help, please don't hesitate to give us a call at the Growth Management Department at 850-891-7001 or visit our website at talgov.com/growth.